So at the beginning of this week's Torah portion of Beshalach, we read the Jews escaping from Egypt. They're beginning to wander around the desert. And the Midrash in Exodus Rabbah comments that the distance from Egypt to where the Jews were heading for was actually 11 days in journey, and God let them wander around for 40 years. Now, what is the significance that it's 11 days? The number 11, what is the inner meaning behind this? So, from a Kabbalistic perspective, everything consists of the substrate of 10. There are 10 sephirot in God's primary emanations, and that filters down to all of mankind. Our personalities consist of 10 sephirot. So when you hear the number 10, it represents the varied structures and impulses within the human psyche. The number 1 represents, of course, God's unity. So 11 is the process by which the 1 enters the 10. Now there's an awareness of the essential oneness of God, the essential idea of monotheism, or in its Kabbalistic formulation of non-dual Judaism, means that everything is submerged in God, this utter unity, ein od milvado, nothing else exists outside God. This idea of unity needs to permeate and become fully comfortable in our consciousness, which consists of 10 faculties. The 1 has to enter the 10. In other words, true spirituality cannot be found in the waters of superficiality. The 1 entering the 10 takes 40 years. It takes 40 years to do the journey of 11, to internalize the message of Hashem Echad, that God is one. It's a lifetime task. And that is the message of the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Chapter 14, verse 21, God makes the sea into dry land. This is the famous splitting of the sea. It's a very popular story because it's this most phenomenal miracle. But what is the meaning of sea turning into dry land? The Kabbalists saw this as something very, very powerful. You see, the problem with life is that we mortals, we inhabitants of this earthly realm, can't relate to our Creator. He's just beyond us. And it's a struggle to understand the meaning of life and the course that He is directing us on. And that is why in life there is always the open, revealed good, and there is sometimes the hidden good, which we call bad. When good is hidden, we just don't relate to it. But we understand, the religious personality understands that there must be some good in everything. So you could divide your entire life into the disclosed and the revealed, and the hidden and the obscure, which we'd like to come down here and become more obvious, but isn't always possible or always easy. The splitting of the sea is when water turned into dry land. Water hides what's below it, dry land reveals what's above it. When the hidden becomes disclosed, we have the culmination of the religious experience. We have the fulfillment of the Torah's message, that ultimately we will become fully conscious of our Creator, and history will be transparent to its purpose. So the sea, splitting of the sea, wasn't just a miracle to save the Jewish people. It was actually a physical representation of the metaphorical idea of disclosing the hidden, which is what we all yearn for. Chapter 15, verse 1. So after the sea splits, what do the Jews do? They erupt in song. Moses leads the men, Miriam leads the women. Why did they erupt into song? Well, kind of a stupid question. They were jubilant, and they wanted to thank God. The way to do that is through song. But the Kabbalists look a little bit deeper than that. You see, every time we have spiritual inspiration, every time we're on a bit of a high, we feel closer to God, things are going well, there's a problem. How do you capture that moment? How do you ensure that it carries forward into the future? That is what Moses was worried about. We've had this fantastic revelation, the sea split, we've had a miracle. How can we capture this moment? And I'm not talking about, I obviously didn't have cameras in those days, I'm not just talking about remembering it from something of the past. I mean, how can we get that spiritual energy and propel it forward into every day of our life? That's what he was worried about. So the song, which is really putting emotions into words, is the encapsulation of the moment. And it's also the spiritual encapsulation. That's why the song begins with the word Oz, Then, the word Oz in Hebrew consists of an Aleph and a Zayin, which means number 1 and number 7. Number 1 of the top of the 3 intellectual Sefirot emanations, Chochmah, Bina, V'das, let's have number 1 of those, and number 7, the last of the 7 emotional Sefirot. So Moses wanted that this tremendous disclosure, this tremendous revelation, should permeate and be felt consciously in the personality, in the Sefirot, and then it will carry forward. Simple message: whenever you have a high moment, maybe journal it, make a note of it, make a song out of it, capture it, because that feeling won't last forever, and it has to be set in stone. It needs to be given the kelim, the vessels, in order to for you to be able to benefit from it later on. Chapter 17, verse 14, we read the commandment to remember Amalek, this nation who gratuitously attacked us when we left Egypt. They represent a dangerous enemy that, if they're not eliminated, they will destroy us, and therefore we're commanded to eliminate them. Now, the word memory, when we say eliminate the memory of Amalek, is the word zecher. But actually, there's some confusion of how to vocalize this word. The way that Hebrew is written is without vowels in the Torah scroll, and therefore the vocalization is transmitted orally, and occasionally there's a confusion of what those vowels are. So many have the custom that when they read it in the synagogue, we read it with both variants. We say zecher Amalek and zecher Amalek and zecher, once with a segol, which is the zecher, and once with a tzera, which is the zeicher. Now, the way these two vowels are drawn is one is 3 dots, the segel is 3 dots, and the tzera is 2 dots. What is the significance of this, going from 3 dots to 2 dots? So the Talmud says that the elimination of Amalek is a prelude to building the temple. Now, in history, there have been 2 temples, but that was preceded by the tabernacle in the desert. So really, there have been 3 temples, and that is the 3 dots of the segel. It's alluded to by the 3 dots of the segel. And what we want to do now is progress from the historical temple to the future messianic temple, the temple that will be built when Mashiach comes, and that is represented by the 2 dots of the tzera. Go from historical to future. And that's a kind of inner Kabbalistic meaning why we read these 2 vocalizations. We want to remember the historical temple and depict its transition to the future one. Spiritual message for the week. Now, the splitting of the sea was a high point in Jewish history. We are informed by the rabbis that at the sea, even a handmaiden saw what the prophets didn't even see later on. It was a collective prophetic experience for all human beings who were present at that moment. And I want to suggest that you do this exercise this week. Shut the door, switch off your phone, switch off your email, close even the windows, and just shut your eyes, take 2 or 3 minutes, and just try to imagine what it must have been like to be with 2 or 3 million people experiencing some sort of divine disclosure. And ask yourself the question, when is the last time I actually yearned for divine disclosure? I yearned for prophetic insight. I yearned for revelation. We're almost embarrassed to speak like this because it sounds so odd. But I think that at the deep core of the human being, we do have a desire for a revelation, for a disclosure of something higher, to experience, and of course it was through the mind, to experience in our mind an opening of the mind to something higher. So, exercise for this week, think about it, meditate on the past experience of prophecy, and develop some sort of taste for it, some sort of yearning for it, and maybe you'll be enlightened in the process. Thank you very much for listening, and please join us next week for Torah in 10.